Hi, my name is Jabril, and I'm a hobbyist game developer. For the past few months, I've been working on a new prototype that I'm feeling pretty excited about. The game is a tower defense roguelike deck builder, where you only get 3 turrets and you move them around a small map to defend the core from enemies. Instead of buying new turrets, you buy totems that provide AoE buffs, and you can move your turrets around these AoEs to make them stronger. As the game progresses, you get access to more totems to face even more difficult enemies. At least, that's the plan right now. So far, I've made relatively good progress on the basics of the game, and so without further ado, let me show you. I started development of the game in early September of this year, and the idea came to me actually because of a camera system I had developed for another project that failed. The dragging and zooming functions of this system is uniquely suitable for a tower defense game with open areas, and while brainstorming for game ideas, the concept of a tower defense game with a limited number of turrets appealed a lot to me. I'd also seen lots of relatively successful versions of this concept, so I decided to run with it. Shortly after porting my old camera system into a new project, I added some turrets and a core to defend. Then some squares for basic enemies, but I noticed that the way enemies spawn in a circle made it pretty hard for a small number of turrets to defend against even a small size wave of enemies. So I improved on it and made enemies spawn in chunks instead. I also let some spawn solo, just to disrupt the monotony and force the player to constantly keep their turrets moving. This is all to facilitate the feeling of panic and hecticness. I don't want the game to feel stagnant after you find an ideal position for your turrets. Then I added the main focus of the game. After every wave of enemies completed, you can select one totem out of 4 randomized options to add to your board. The totems are pretty simple code-wise. Every totem is the same object and they run different code based on the data provided to them, but their code structures remain relatively similar. The system lets me have a good balance between individual quirks between different totems, as well as having an overarching code structure that I can edit once to see it applied over every totem. It's a system that I learned while developing my first Steam game, which was also a roguelike. Anyways, the totems are pretty simple. They detect any turrets within their radius and provide the appropriate buff. Unlike turrets, however, their positions cannot be moved once placed, so the player will need to properly consider what parts of their field they want to prioritize and or risk. Then I did more boring UI work and added a game over screen as well as a menu. And it's here that I run into the first major game design problem of this project. You might have noticed from the gameplay video so far, but the fact that the map is a circle and the core is in its origin point means that the ideal way to defend your core is to place all your turrets and all your totems in the center of the core. The problem with that is that it works way too well and makes the game too easy. It also completely sidelines the hectic gameplay I'm going for with this game. Initially, I wanted to avoid the most obvious solution of simply preventing players from placing turrets too close to each other. This was because I wanted to opt for design choices that would give the players more freedom of choice for strategy and not restrict their options. I consulted a game dev server and received some advice to make the maps differently shaped, and even to place the core in different locations. It seemed like a great idea at first glance, but then I realized the weird shapes of maps would mean a great deal of inconvenience for the player moving turrets during hectic gameplay, and the systems required to make maps of all different shapes and sizes just made my headache. In the end, I had no choice but to surrender to the initial and most obvious solution, and that's how the heat mechanic was born. Now when turrets get close to each other, they release heat that builds up as they fire. Once the heat level reaches 30% of its max, their fire rate and damage drops off, and at 80% or above, their turrets entirely die and are only revivable in the next round. It initially was something I wasn't too happy about, but after considering all the possibilities of what can be done with the heat mechanic and how well it mostly works to deter spamming everything in the center, I'm pretty satisfied with it. Once I was done with that, I added all the content that I planned for the rough prototype. So far we have 3 enemy types: normal enemy, a leader type that attracts other enemies to itself, and a tank enemy with a large health. Totem wise, I added 10 different totems, ranging from fire rate buffs to totems that completely change your turrets to different weapons. At this point, most of the game and content was all done, but the game looked absolutely barren because I had brushed off doing art in favor of putting my focus on coding and finishing the base of the game faster. So 2 months into development, I finally started doing art for my game. You'll understand very soon that I'm not an artist. I'm a programmer first, game dev second, and artist deadlines. I've gotten away with not having to do art most of the time by either sticking to very simple art styles or just collabing with super talented artists. But this time I truly wanted to claim this project as my own and also avoid the inconveniences of a rev share project. So I decided I would just try my best with the art. Unlike with my first commercial project though, I decided to not go for a minimalist 1-bit art style again. As much as many of my players have told me the art style is charming, 1-bit and minimalist art is simply a hard sell on places like Steam. I've seen games on Steam that have looked much worse than my first game visually, but still gotten better performances and reviews simply based on the fact that there was more than one color on the screen. So with my utmost best, I started drawing. My strategy for art was simple. I start off with a basic idea of what I want to draw, then I scour free resources online for references, and sketch out an acceptable shape. After that, I search for pixel art images with vibes that I want and rip out their color palettes. After doing some very basic coloring, I add a 2 pixel outline to it all. That last step is really what brings my art from ugly to mildly acceptable. With this method, I got an okayish art, but there definitely are some inconsistencies with the overall vibe. And there are also some times where this process, as refined as it is, can save my god-awful art. So I plan to mostly commission artists for those parts that I really can't handle myself. Overall though, I'm happy with what I've achieved so far in this project in 3 months, and I'm really excited for what's more to come. There are more things that I haven't covered in this video that I think would be pretty interesting, but I don't want to keep the video too long. I'm still new to editing and I'm taking it slow. Regardless, if you like the first devlog, consider joining my Discord server and keeping up with the game's progress. If you can tolerate my art, maybe consider checking out my previous game as well. That's all for now, thanks for watching.